Well, today is Spy Wednesday, and it's an interesting time on this Holy Week. Here we are in that center of Holy Week, I guess essentially, although Holy Week goes from Monday through Sunday, so maybe tomorrow is actually the center, but whatever. So anyway, here we are, and this is where we see in the gospel that Judas gives away where Jesus is going to be. So he betrays Jesus. And we talked yesterday why he did that, in that Jesus did not meet his expectations of what he thought he was going to do, which was to overthrow the Russians. Sorry, the Romans. Overthrow the Romans. And in doing so, in overthrowing the Romans, then we would again have a sovereign nation. Now, to understand that, you have to understand the way Judaism looks at the land that God gave them. This is the important consideration. That land and their position on the land spoke about their relationship with God. So, and again, what is the image that you're seeing here? You kind of take a look at some of the images you're seeing here. You see the story of Lazarus. You see some of the other stories. You see the story of the apostles at sea, and the waves are coming over what we would call the gunnels. And all of that, you see all of that and realize in every one of the answers, it was beyond their imagination what Jesus does. It was beyond the imagination of Mary and Martha that Lazarus would be raised from the dead. It was beyond the imagination of the apostles that the storm would stop over and over and over again. And this is the theme that you see in the Gospels, is that they pray to the Lord asking him for, whatever it is, and they find that many times he offers a greater miracle than they are looking for, a miracle that is beyond their imagination. And that's this new aspect of who Jesus is. So Judas obviously hasn't got that message, but actually no one else did, but Judas is acting on it. He has come to the decision that Jesus, being who he imagines him to be, that he is not fulfilling that role. He can't fulfill that role. Therefore, they are following the wrong person, and for his good, this is the way Judas is thinking of it, and the good of others, he is going to betray Jesus, because ultimately what he is saying is the Pharisees must be right. So he goes to the Pharisees because he's decided that they are right and Jesus is wrong. And it's a fascinating dynamic. If you want to see the dynamic in modern times, go see the movie The Falcon and the Snowman, which has absolutely nothing to do with this. By the way, if you happen to check out the opera, Jesus Christ Superstar, remember that's from the that's from the perspective of Judas. So knowing that, go watch that opera again. But back to The Falcon and the Snowman. That's based on a true story, and the Falcon, they were code names with the Russians. They were spies for the Russians. They were Americans. The Falcon was a man by the name of Christopher Boyce, and I forget who the Snowman was. He was like a drug dealer he was working with. And what had happened is Christopher Boyce's father worked for TRW. If you remember that company, a company called TRW. Well, TRW was a contractor with the CIA. And you may or may not know this story, but in Australia, the United States actually organized a coup against Australia. It was basically they didn't like, I think it was the Prime Minister. And not liking the Prime Minister, they worked out something with the Queen of England, who had the power because Australia is one of the Commonwealth of Nations, to dissolve Parliament, and they'd have to do all new elections. And so the United States arranged that through the CIA and arranged that to happen, and all of that happened. It's a kind of a sore point between the Australians and the Americans to this day. Well, Christopher Boyce was working for TRW at the time, and he saw this very top secret information coming in and realized that the United States was engaged in meddling in another government, in an ally of our country. And he came up with the idea that if this is the kind of thing the United States does, this is according to the story. I've never met him. He might tell you a different story. I have no idea. But he says, if this is the kind of things the United States does, then what we must understand about the United States is wrong in his mind, and therefore the Russians must be the right ones, because he's thinking very black and white. If we're doing bad things, then, and the Russians are our definition of bad people, which would be the opposite of what we do, then they must be the good people. And he started selling secrets to the Russians in support, probably for money, but also in support of his belief that if the United States was doing things like that, then the Russians must be the good people. Same kind of thinking that Judas is doing. So you can see this kind of thinking happens all the time. Ultimately, Christopher Boyce discovered the deep secret that all governments do this stuff. And therefore, he realized that black and white thinking, and this is my description, that black and white thinking, similar to Judas, that black and white thinking that the good people do good things and the bad people do bad things, and if good people do bad things, that they must be bad people, so the good people we call the bad people must be the good people. And that's essentially what Judas is doing. He's going and saying, this Jesus is not going to turn around and overthrow the Russians. I said it again, the Romans. I have nothing against the Russians. I'm sorry. The Romans, this Jesus is not going to overthrow the Romans, and if he's not going to overthrow the Romans, then why are we following this guy? We followed the wrong guy, and if he is the wrong guy, then the Pharisees must be right. And so he betrayed the Pharisees, Jesus, and that was what he did. And in the midst of it, he got 30 pieces of silver. Now, I talked about it a little bit yesterday, that Judas is declared by the Council of Trent to be in hell. And so therefore, all those people who say, well, the Council of Trent is infallible, then you can say to them, then if Judas has been infallibly declared in hell. As to whether that's true or not, you have to check out your local ecclesiologist. But in any case, and the reason why he's in hell is not because of betraying Jesus. The reason why is he is so despairful of his action that he could be ever forgiven for what he's done. He is therefore believes he cannot be forgiven, and therefore he refuses to ask for forgiveness. And that makes him basically falling to one of the sins of the Holy Spirit, which is despair of salvation. And so that's why he's in hell. It is not because he betrayed Jesus. But why did he betray Jesus? He betrayed Jesus because he was caught up in black and white thinking, and he figured if Jesus doesn't match his expectation, then he must be following the wrong person. But again, we can read the Gospels today and see Jesus was talking. Jesus' actions are as one of my favorite sayings is, Jesus' actions are not on everyone's bingo card, because no one's expecting him to raise Lazarus from the dead. No one's expecting him to shut down the storm, and no one's expecting him to raise from the dead. And one of the things to keep in mind is God turns everything around. So if you take that and you understand, God turns everything around. So what we see as this absolute disaster, Jesus dies on the cross, God turns it around to not only the resurrection, but also proof that Jesus died on the cross, because no one could have survived that. And especially not spending time in a tomb. No one could have survived that. And even if you were to assume for the slightest second that Jesus could have survived that and been just barely alive when they put him in the tomb, the infection that he would have suffered during that time would have killed him anyway. Bottom line, no one could have survived that in those times at that time. So when we look at all that, we see this intense reality where Jesus takes this death, where God the Father rather takes this death, turns it around and brings it to the greatest of hope. But as one of my favorite saying is, no one has that on their bingo card until Jesus raises from the dead, and now it's a whole new understanding. And what is that pattern? This is what you expect. This is what I deliver, and what I deliver is greater than your expectations. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Subscribe, pass the word, let people know, and we'll be right back right after this from the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. There's an interesting article on the Vatican website. You can find that at vaticannews.va. I think you have to put the www in. I know it used to be the case. And so just for the heck of it, www.vaticannews.va. It's not a .com. It's a VA. Of course, that stands for the Vatican. And there's an article there about the Pope met with Illinois municipal leaders. And he said, according to the headline, but also according to the article, obviously, authority must be rooted in service. And that is fascinating. I remember I was talking to someone a long time ago who was a city councilor in the city of Quincy, Massachusetts. That's Quincy, by the way, just so you know. It's not Quincy, that's in Illinois, but Quincy is in Massachusetts. Anyway, he was a city councilor for the city of Quincy, Massachusetts, and he talked about how he just loved doing the job because it was a job of service and helping people with different issues that they dealt with. He just loved doing that. And there you go. This is what the Pope is saying, that the role of elected office is to serve the people and to help them with many of their issues. Now, it says that the responsibility of civic leaders to serve the common good, uphold human dignity, and care for the most vulnerable. And that's really great. I also learned something in this article. This is funny because it comes from the Vatican, so it's coming to us from Europe. And granted, the Pope is from Chicago, and the story takes place in Illinois. I had no idea the capital, it's in the article, the capital of Illinois is Springfield. I always thought it was Chicago. Shows you what I know. So anyway, but that's what he's talking about. And this is one of the things that we always want to look at. What are our civic leaders, our elected leaders, doing for us as in light of the common good? Not doing for me, but doing for us in light of the common good. And this is one of the issues that we have. First of all, we have a republic, not a democracy. And in fact, I was reading Richard Wolff's book on Marxism, and because I read all kinds of things, and I also read his book on capitalism, if that makes you feel good. But one of the things he says is true Marxism is democratic, and everything's democratic. So your workplace should be democratic, and everything should be democratic. But that's true Marxism, which Stalinism didn't have, Leninism didn't have. Obviously, they don't have it in the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. Neither do they have that in any other, the Marx Cuba or anything else. But that's what it's supposed to be. It's all democratic, and all the workers work together. And strangely enough, the Jews had that system. It was called a kibbutz. But here in our country, we don't have a democracy, we have a republic, and you elect officials who then do the work of governing in a way that benefits who they are called to benefit, which in our country should be everybody in light of the common good. Now, one of the issues we have in our own country is they say that the democratic aspect of a republic is for sale, that whoever contributes, then he will have to serve those people. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And whether or not it actually happens that way, that's a different story. But a true elected leader is called to really understand how to serve the constituents. And one of the things I've always said, and in light of that, and this is something many people never understood, but I think it's important for us to understand, is the Massachusetts love for Ted Kennedy, because you'd listen to people from other parts of the country who did not agree with his stance on many things, and they would rail against him. But one thing they didn't know about Ted Kennedy is he was a master of, and I don't mean that in a negative way, of constituent services. He knew how to serve the people. And many other people may not. Some people may listen to this and say, "What? He's talking about Ted Kennedy. Are you kidding me?" But that was, for his role in constituent services, was masterful, because he understood that was his job. He had political positions that we may not agree with. That's absolutely true. That would be true in everybody. But he understood how to serve the common good in general. I mean, he was pro-abortion. He was part of a group of politicians, along with, I do believe, Mario Cuomo was another one, who were personally against abortion, but didn't believe in being politically putting their positions on other people, which was, I forget the exact name for that, but there was a special name for that position. It basically was rooted out of, among other places, Hyannisport, Massachusetts, which was the home of the Kennedys. And that was one of the positions. But we know that in many cases, this is the way a good politician or good statesman understands constituent services, serving the people well. And that's their job. Whether the person is a multimillionaire or whether the person is, living on the street and you're trying to find a place for them to live, you are there to serve the people. It brings up something that has not been brought up by any of the pundits that I've listened to. They will say that certain blue states, and mine is one of them, wants many of those who have no papers coming across the border one way or the other, and they want them here to add to the numbers so we have greater representation in Congress, because it works that way in the Constitution. Well, okay, people agree with that, people disagree with that. I'm not going to go down that path right now. Where I'm going to go right now is to say to the representatives, if that's the system you believe in, then even if someone does not have papers, you represent them. And if you just using them as numbers, then you're manipulating people, and that is unjust. You represent anyone who, because of them, you are there. And it's not just the people who elected you. It is everybody that you serve in your district, regardless of what level of government you live. You know, whether it's representative, whether it's city councilor, whether it's town meeting member, or whether it's the President of the United States. Your role is to serve everyone in your district. In the case of the President, it's the entire country. In the case of the representative, it's everyone in his congressional district. But everyone in his congressional district, not just the people who voted for him, not just the people who donated to him or her, but everyone. And his role is to make sure everything fits with the common good. And that's an important consideration. That's what elected officials are supposed to do. And whatever office that you work in, your role is to work in that office in such a way that you are not only helping all people, but you're doing what's best for all people, what's just for the common good, period. And if you're using that as a stepping stone and that's all you care about, that's not good, and you really shouldn't go anywhere higher. So those are some important considerations to keep in mind. And the Pope brings that out in his meeting with that committee from the Illinois, where, among other things, we learn that the capital of Illinois is Springfield. I didn't know that. Okay, we'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back. Going back to receive your high school diploma can make a huge difference in your life. Not just for you, but for your loved ones and your community as well. Across the country, thousands of free adult education centers are ready to help with teachers who will guide you every step of the way. Find free and supportive adult education centers near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council, and the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. So tomorrow is Maundy Thursday. Tomorrow's Holy Thursday. By the way, in your parish, you don't have a Mass in the morning. You'll have a Mass in the evening, and they usually have Eucharistic adoration. Usually up until midnight. And that's also a common practice. I don't know if it's national, but at least locally here in Massachusetts, in Boston rather, it's a common practice to visit 7 churches. Now, the first parish I was ever in as a priest, there was a church every 5 blocks. So to visit 7 churches was fairly easy. I don't know if this is still a practice or if it's a national practice, but this was in the Dorchester, Boston area. Visiting 7 churches was fairly easy because it was a church every 5 blocks. But in any case, this is what we're going to look at tomorrow. So those are the readings. Some of you may have experienced the Chrism Mass, but in many dioceses, the Chrism Mass is also tomorrow, where the bishop blesses all the oils. We'll see you then. Have a blessed day.
Yeah, you know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host, Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up. Word up. Word up.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.